You seriously think someone like you could run this company? Victoria Sterling's laughter echoed through the marble-walled executive corridor of Sterling and Associates Financial Consulting as she clutched my CEO application, treating it like an amusing piece of fiction rather than a serious professional document. 6 months later, I would walk into that same boardroom as the newly appointed chief executive officer of her direct competitor, watching her face drain of color as she realized the woman she had dismissed was now positioned to dismantle everything she had built through arrogance and incompetence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor headquarters in downtown Chicago, casting dramatic shadows across the polished granite surfaces that reflected Victoria's perfectly manicured image back at her. She stood there in her designer business suit, platinum jewelry gleaming under the recessed lighting, embodying every stereotype of corporate privilege and inherited authority that had come to define her leadership style over the past 18 months, since her father had appointed her as chief executive officer of the family-owned financial consulting firm. My name is Sophia Chen, and at 39 years old, I had spent the previous 8 years serving as the chief operating officer at Sterling and Associates, a position that placed me directly responsible for the day-to-day operations that kept the firm profitable, while Victoria focused on what she considered the more glamorous aspects of executive leadership such as client entertainment, industry conferences, and media appearances that enhanced her personal brand within Chicago's business community. Victoria had inherited her position through family connections rather than professional merit, a fact that became increasingly apparent to everyone within the organization, as her decision-making consistently prioritized short-term financial gains over sustainable business practices. Her father, Harrison Sterling, had built the firm over 30 years into one of the most respected financial consulting practices in the Midwest, but his declining health had forced him to transfer operational control to Victoria, despite concerns expressed by several board members about her readiness for such comprehensive executive responsibility. The catalyst for my CEO application had been Harrison's announcement that he intended to step down permanently from active leadership within the next 12 months, creating an opportunity for organizational transition that could either preserve the firm's reputation for excellence or accelerate its decline under continued mismanagement. Victoria had assumed that her family ownership stake guaranteed her permanent succession to the CEO role, but the corporate governance structure Harrison had established actually required board approval for any leadership transition, creating an opening for alternative candidates who could demonstrate superior qualifications. Sophia, this is absolutely hilarious, Victoria continued, waving my application in the air like a trophy. Do you honestly believe that anyone would consider promoting someone from operations to executive leadership? You handle scheduling and logistics, not strategy and vision. The board needs someone with real leadership experience and industry credibility, not a glorified project manager who thinks organizing meetings qualifies as corporate governance. Her characterization of my role demonstrated the fundamental misunderstanding that had defined her perception of organizational dynamics throughout her tenure as CEO. Victoria viewed operations as administrative support rather than strategic execution, failing to comprehend that the operational excellence I had maintained was directly responsible for the client satisfaction and financial performance that sustained the firm's market position despite her inadequate leadership decisions. The reality was that my 8 years as chief operating officer had involved far more than the administrative functions Victoria described. I had designed and implemented the comprehensive client service frameworks that enabled the firm to maintain relationships with Fortune 500 companies requiring sophisticated financial analysis and strategic consulting services. I had developed the risk management protocols that protected client assets during market volatility, while ensuring regulatory compliance across multiple jurisdictions. I had built the operational infrastructure that allowed the firm to scale from managing $2 billion in client assets to over $12 billion, without compromising service quality or increasing operational costs proportionally. Moreover, my educational background and professional certifications positioned me as exceptionally qualified for executive leadership in financial services. I held an MBA in finance from Northwestern Kellogg School of Management, a chartered financial analyst designation, and had completed advanced executive education programs at Harvard Business School, focusing on strategic leadership and organizational transformation. My professional experience prior to joining Sterling & Associates included 5 years as a senior consultant at McKinsey & Company, where I had advised Fortune 100 companies on operational optimization and strategic restructuring initiatives. Victoria, in contrast, had earned an undergraduate degree in communications from a private liberal arts college, followed by a brief stint at a public relations firm before joining the family business in a marketing role that gradually expanded into executive responsibilities through nepotism rather than demonstrated competence. Her understanding of financial markets remained superficial, her grasp of regulatory requirements was minimal, and her strategic planning capabilities were consistently undermined by impulsive decision-making that prioritized immediate gratification over long-term value creation. Victoria, I believe my qualifications and track record speak for themselves, I responded, maintaining professional composure despite her condescending tone. The operational improvements I have implemented have directly contributed to our revenue growth and client retention rates. The board will evaluate all candidates based on their ability to preserve and enhance the firm's reputation for excellence, and I am confident that my experience and vision align with those objectives. Her expression shifted from amusement to irritation, as she realized I was not backing down from my application or accepting her dismissive characterization of my capabilities. Victoria had grown accustomed to having her authority go unchallenged within the organization, partly because her family ownership stake intimidated most employees from expressing disagreement, and partly because her volatile temperament made confrontation professionally risky for anyone dependent on her approval for career advancement. "Sophia, you need to understand your place in this organization," Victoria said, her voice taking on the sharp edge that typically preceded her more aggressive management tactics. "I appreciate the contributions you have made in your current role, but executive leadership requires a completely different skill set. You excel at following directions and implementing policies that others create, but you lack the vision and industry relationships necessary for strategic leadership." The irony of her statement was profound, given that the strategic initiative she credited to her own leadership had actually originated from my analysis and recommendations, which she had appropriated and presented to the board as evidence of her executive capabilities. The client retention strategies that had preserved relationships during difficult market conditions, the cost optimization programs that had improved profit margins without reducing service quality, and the technology implementations that had enhanced operational efficiency had all been developed through my strategic planning and executed through my operational oversight. Victoria's industry relationships consisted primarily of social connections made through family networks and maintained through expensive entertainment rather than professional credibility or mutual business value. Her strategic vision extended little beyond quarterly financial targets and public relations opportunities that enhanced her personal profile within Chicago's business community. Her decision-making process relied heavily on intuition and emotion, rather than data analysis and systematic evaluation of alternatives. The most concerning aspect of Victoria's leadership style was her consistent pattern of taking credit for successes, while deflecting responsibility for failures onto subordinates or external factors beyond her control. When client relationships deteriorated due to her poor communication or unrealistic commitments, she blamed operational execution failures. When regulatory compliance issues arose from her inadequate attention to policy requirements, she attributed problems to industry complexity rather than leadership oversight. When financial performance declined due to her strategic miscalculations, she cited market conditions rather than acknowledging decision-making errors. This pattern of behavior had created a toxic organizational culture where employees were reluctant to provide honest feedback or raise concerns about strategic direction, knowing that disagreement with Victoria's preferences could result in professional retaliation. The firm's senior consultants had begun expressing frustration privately about the declining quality of client service and the increasing difficulty of maintaining professional standards under her leadership, but few were willing to voice these concerns directly to Victoria or the board of directors. The catalyst for my decision to apply for the CEO position had been a particularly egregious example of Victoria's poor judgment that threatened to damage the firm's relationship with our largest client, a multinational manufacturing company that generated approximately 30% of our annual revenue. Victoria had committed the firm to delivering a comprehensive strategic analysis within an impossible timeline, ignoring my warnings about resource constraints and the complexity of the required research, because she wanted to impress the client's executive team during a high-profile industry conference. When the project inevitably encountered delays due to insufficient time allocation and inadequate research methodology, Victoria had blamed my operational management and demanded that I find ways to accelerate delivery without compromising quality, a request that violated basic principles of professional consulting ethics. The situation had been resolved only through my personal intervention with the client's management team, explaining the challenges honestly and negotiating a revised timeline that preserved the relationship while maintaining our professional integrity. That incident had crystallized my understanding that the firm's long-term viability depended on replacing Victoria's impulsive and ego-driven leadership with strategic thinking and operational competence that could preserve the reputation Harrison Sterling had built over 3 decades. The board of directors needed to understand that continued deterioration under Victoria's leadership would eventually result in client defections, regulatory problems, and financial decline that could destroy the firm permanently. "Victoria, I respectfully disagree with your assessment of my capabilities," I said, deciding that directness was more effective than diplomatic evasion. "The strategic initiatives you reference have been developed through collaborative processes, where my analysis and recommendations have been instrumental. The board will have access to detailed documentation of my contributions to the firm's success, including specific examples of strategic planning and execution that demonstrate executive-level capabilities." Her face flushed with anger as she realized that I was challenging not only her authority but also her narrative about the source of the firm's recent achievements. Victoria had become comfortable with taking credit for successes that originated from others' work, but she was not prepared to have that dynamic questioned directly by someone she considered subordinate. "Sophia, this conversation is over," Victoria declared, crumpling my application and dropping it into the wastebasket beside her desk with theatrical disdain. "Your application will not be considered by the board, and I suggest you focus on your current responsibilities rather than pursuing unrealistic ambitions that are clearly beyond your qualifications." As I watched my carefully prepared application disappear into the trash, I felt a surge of determination that transformed disappointment into strategic resolve. Victoria's dismissive treatment and professional disrespect had revealed the depth of her insecurity about her own legitimacy as a leader, but it had also demonstrated that she fundamentally misunderstood the power dynamics within the organization and the board's commitment to preserving the firm's long-term success. What Victoria failed to realize was that her authority as CEO was not absolute, and her family ownership stake did not guarantee permanent control over strategic decisions that affected the firm's future viability. The board of directors included several independent members who had worked closely with Harrison Sterling for decades and shared his commitment to maintaining the firm's reputation for excellence and professional integrity. These board members had observed Victoria's leadership performance with growing concern and were likely to welcome alternative candidates who could demonstrate superior qualifications and strategic vision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Moreover, Victoria's dismissive treatment of my application would itself become evidence of the poor judgment and interpersonal skills that made her unsuitable for continued executive leadership. Professional executives do not respond to internal candidates by laughing at their qualifications or discarding their applications without proper evaluation. Her behavior demonstrated exactly the kind of arrogance and disrespect that was undermining organizational culture and threatening the firm's long-term success. As I left Victoria's office and returned to my workspace, I began developing a comprehensive strategy that would demonstrate my executive capabilities while documenting the operational and strategic challenges that were accumulating under her leadership. The board needed to understand both the positive contributions I could make as CEO and the negative consequences of allowing Victoria's mismanagement to continue without intervention. The irony was that Victoria's attempt to humiliate me had actually provided the motivation and justification I needed to pursue the CEO position with complete determination and strategic focus. Her laughter would soon be replaced by silence as she discovered that competence and preparation ultimately prevail over privilege and arrogance in organizations that prioritize long-term success over short-term comfort. The journey that led me to that humiliating moment in Victoria Sterling's office began 15 years earlier in the cramped dormitory room at Northwestern University, where I was working 2 part-time jobs while completing my undergraduate degree in economics, with a concentration in financial analysis. The path to becoming Chief Operating Officer of Sterling and Associates had been forged through determination, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to excellence that would eventually prove more valuable than any inherited privilege or family connections. Growing up as the daughter of immigrants who had arrived from Taiwan with advanced degrees that were not recognized in the United States, I had learned early that success required both exceptional competence and strategic positioning within systems that did not automatically recognize merit. My father had been a university professor of mechanical engineering in Taipei, while my mother had worked as a research scientist for a pharmaceutical company, but in Chicago they found employment as a taxi driver and laboratory technician respectively, rebuilding their professional lives while ensuring their children had access to educational opportunities they had been forced to abandon. The lessons of resilience and adaptation that I absorbed during my childhood would prove instrumental in navigating the complex dynamics of corporate leadership, where technical competence alone was insufficient without political awareness and strategic relationship building. My parents had demonstrated that expertise without proper positioning could be overlooked or undervalued, but they had also shown that persistent excellence eventually creates opportunities for recognition and advancement. During my undergraduate studies at Northwestern, I distinguished myself not only through academic achievement, but also through leadership roles in student organizations that required the same operational management and strategic thinking skills that would later define my professional career. As president of the Economic Society, I redesigned the organization's structure to improve member engagement and professional development opportunities, implementing mentorship programs and industry networking events that tripled membership within 2 years. More significantly, I developed and executed a comprehensive fundraising strategy that enabled the organization to provide scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds who demonstrated exceptional academic potential but lacked financial resources. The scholarship program required sophisticated financial planning, donor relationship management, and outcome measurement that provided practical experience in the kind of stakeholder management and results-oriented thinking that distinguished effective executives from administrative managers. The fundraising success attracted attention from the business school faculty, leading to research assistant opportunities that exposed me to advanced financial analysis techniques and strategic consulting methodologies. Professor Margaret Richardson, who directed the school's Center for Financial Research, became an important mentor who helped me understand the connection between rigorous analytical thinking and practical business problem solving. Working with Professor Richardson on consulting projects for regional businesses provided my first exposure to the challenges facing mid-sized companies that lacked the resources for extensive internal strategic planning capabilities. These organizations often possess strong operational competencies and established market positions, but they struggled with strategic planning, technology implementation, and organizational development that required external expertise and systematic implementation processes. One particularly formative project involved helping a family-owned manufacturing company develop a succession planning strategy that would preserve operational continuity while enabling growth and modernization. The company had been founded by an immigrant entrepreneur who had built the business through personal relationships and intuitive decision-making, but the second generation faced competitive pressures that required more sophisticated strategic planning and professional management practices. The succession planning project required extensive analysis of the company's financial performance, operational capabilities, market position, and competitive landscape, followed by the development of comprehensive recommendations for organizational structure, leadership development, and strategic positioning. The complexity of balancing family dynamics with business requirements provided invaluable experience in managing multiple stakeholder perspectives while maintaining focus on long-term value creation. The success of this project, which resulted in a seamless leadership transition and subsequent revenue growth, established my reputation within the business school as someone who could bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical implementation. This recognition led to additional consulting opportunities and ultimately to a summer internship at McKinsey & Company, where I would develop the advanced strategic thinking and client management skills that would define my professional approach for the following decade. The McKinsey experience was transformative in ways that extended far beyond technical skill development. The firm's culture of analytical rigor, client focus, and continuous learning created an environment where excellence was expected rather than exceptional, and where intellectual curiosity was valued as much as practical results. Working alongside consultants who had advised Fortune 100 companies on their most complex strategic challenges provided exposure to the highest levels of business thinking and problem-solving. My first major project at McKinsey involved helping a regional bank develop a digital transformation strategy that would enable competitive positioning against larger national institutions while preserving the personalized service relationships that constituted their primary market advantage. The project required comprehensive analysis of technology trends, customer behavior patterns, competitive positioning, and regulatory requirements, followed by the development of an implementation roadmap that balanced innovation with risk management. The digital transformation project was particularly valuable because it required understanding how technology initiatives must be integrated with organizational culture, operational processes, and strategic objectives to achieve sustainable competitive advantages. The bank's leadership initially viewed technology primarily as a cost reduction tool, but our analysis demonstrated that strategic technology implementation could actually enhance customer relationships while improving operational efficiency. The project's success led to additional assignments focused on operational optimization and strategic restructuring, where I developed expertise in the systematic analysis of complex business challenges and the development of comprehensive solutions that addressed both immediate problems and long-term strategic positioning. The McKinsey methodology emphasized the importance of hypothesis-driven analysis, structured problem-solving, and clear communication of complex recommendations to diverse stakeholder audiences. After completing my MBA at Northwestern Kellogg School of Management, I returned to McKinsey as a full-time consultant, where I specialized in financial services and operational excellence projects that required deep understanding of regulatory environments, risk management, and performance optimization. The financial services specialization provided extensive experience with the kind of strategic challenges that would later prove directly relevant to my role at Sterling and Associates. One of my most significant projects involved helping a mid-sized investment advisory firm develop a growth strategy that would enable expansion into new market segments, while maintaining the fiduciary standards and client service quality that had established their reputation. The firm faced increasing competition from larger institutions with greater resources and technology capabilities, but they possessed deep expertise and established relationships that could be leveraged for sustainable competitive advantage. The growth strategy project required comprehensive analysis of market opportunities, competitive positioning, operational capabilities, and regulatory requirements, followed by the development of specific recommendations for service expansion, technology investment, and organizational development. The project was particularly complex because it required balancing growth ambitions with risk management in a highly regulated industry where reputation and trust were paramount. The successful implementation of the growth strategy resulted in revenue increases of over 40% within 2 years, while maintaining the client satisfaction and regulatory compliance standards that had distinguished the firm within their market. The project's success established my reputation as someone who could develop and execute strategic initiatives that delivered measurable business results while preserving the operational excellence and professional integrity that clients expected. My decision to leave McKinsey and join Sterling and Associates as Chief Operating Officer was motivated by the opportunity to apply strategic consulting principles within a single organization over an extended period, rather than moving between different clients and industries on short-term assignments. The consulting experience had been intellectually stimulating and professionally rewarding, but I was increasingly interested in seeing the long-term impact of strategic initiatives and building sustainable organizational capabilities. Harrison Sterling had recruited me personally after learning about my work through professional networks within the financial services industry. His approach to business development and client relationship management aligned with my own values regarding professional integrity and long-term value creation, and his vision for expanding the firm's capabilities while maintaining their reputation for excellence presented exactly the kind of challenge I found most compelling. During my initial interview with Harrison, He had been remarkably candid about the challenges facing the firm and the role he envisioned for a chief operating officer who could bring strategic thinking and operational discipline to support continued growth. The firm had achieved success through Harrison's personal relationships and expertise, but sustainable growth required more systematic approaches to service delivery, client management, and organizational development. Harrison explained that he was particularly concerned about succession planning and the need to develop leadership capabilities within the organization that could preserve the firm's reputation and client relationships beyond his own direct involvement. His daughter Victoria was being considered for increased responsibilities, but he acknowledged concerns about her readiness for comprehensive leadership roles and the importance of building strong operational support for any future leadership transition. The opportunity to work directly with Harrison Sterling while building the operational infrastructure necessary for sustainable growth represented the perfect combination of strategic challenge and practical impact that I had been seeking. The firm's established market position and reputation provided a strong foundation, while the growth objectives and succession planning requirements created opportunities for significant contribution and professional development. My first year as Chief Operating Officer had been focused primarily on understanding the firm's existing capabilities, client relationships, and operational processes, while identifying opportunities for improvement and systematic enhancement. The analysis revealed that the firm's success was built on exceptionally strong client relationships and high-quality service delivery, but that operational processes were largely informal and dependent on individual expertise rather than systematic procedures. The informal operational approach had worked effectively during the firm's earlier stages of development, when Harrison could personally oversee most client relationships and strategic decisions. However, continued growth required more systematic approaches to service delivery, quality control, and client management that could maintain excellence while reducing dependence on individual oversight and intervention. Over the subsequent years, I had systematically developed and implemented comprehensive operational frameworks that preserved the personalized service and attention to detail that distinguished Sterling and Associates, while creating the scalability and consistency necessary for sustainable growth. The operational improvements included standardized service delivery processes, comprehensive quality control procedures, advanced client relationship management systems, and systematic performance measurement that enabled continuous improvement and strategic planning. The most significant operational achievement had been the development of a comprehensive client service framework that enabled the firm to serve Fortune 500 companies requiring sophisticated financial analysis and strategic consulting services. These enterprise clients had more complex requirements and higher expectations than the firm's traditional middle-market clientele, but they also represented opportunities for substantial revenue growth and enhanced market positioning. Serving enterprise clients required capabilities that extended beyond individual expertise to include systematic project management, comprehensive quality assurance, regulatory compliance, and coordinated service delivery across multiple functional areas. The operational framework I developed enabled the firm to compete successfully for enterprise contracts while maintaining the client satisfaction and service quality that had established their market reputation. The enterprise client expansion had resulted in revenue growth from approximately $100 million to over $300 million in assets under management, while maintaining client retention rates above 95% and satisfaction scores that consistently exceeded industry benchmarks. The growth had been achieved while actually improving profit margins through operational efficiency improvements and strategic positioning that enabled premium pricing for distinctive service capabilities. These measurable achievements in operational excellence and strategic execution had established my credibility within the firm and the broader financial services industry, creating the foundation for legitimate consideration for executive leadership roles. The combination of strategic consulting experience, operational management expertise, and demonstrated results positioned me as exceptionally qualified for CEO responsibilities, regardless of Victoria's dismissive characterization of my capabilities. The irony of Victoria's laughter was that it revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of what actually constituted executive leadership qualifications in professional service organizations. Her focus on social status and family connections ignored the operational competence and strategic thinking that enabled sustainable business success, while her dismissive attitude toward my achievements demonstrated exactly the kind of arrogance that undermined effective leadership and organizational performance. The deterioration of Sterling and Associates began with subtle indicators that required operational expertise to recognize properly. Most of the senior management team remained focused on quarterly revenue figures and client acquisition metrics that painted a superficially positive picture, while I observed with growing concern as Victoria Sterling's strategic decisions systematically undermined the foundational principles that had sustained the firm's reputation for excellence over 3 decades. The first significant warning sign emerged during Victoria's restructuring of the client service delivery model, an initiative she announced as a modernization effort designed to improve efficiency and reduce operational costs. The existing service model had been built around dedicated account teams that developed deep understanding of individual client requirements and maintained consistent relationships over extended periods, enabling the personalized attention and specialized expertise that distinguished Sterling and Associates from larger institutional competitors. Victoria proposed replacing the dedicated team approach with a centralized service model that would assign clients to different specialists based on specific transaction types, rather than maintaining ongoing relationships with consistent account managers. The centralized approach promised to reduce redundancy and enable more efficient utilization of specialized expertise across the firm's entire client portfolio. During the planning meetings for this restructuring initiative, I presented comprehensive analysis demonstrating that the dedicated team model was actually a core competitive advantage that enabled premium pricing and superior client retention rates. The data showed that clients served by dedicated teams generated approximately 30% higher revenue per relationship and exhibited retention rates nearly 20 percentage points above industry averages, while satisfaction surveys consistently highlighted the value of personalized service and relationship continuity. Victoria dismissed my analysis as resistance to change and outdated thinking that failed to recognize modern best practices in financial services. She argued that clients primarily valued expertise and results, rather than relationship continuity, and that the centralized model would actually improve service quality by ensuring that every client interaction involved the most qualified specialist for their specific requirements. The fundamental flaw in Victoria's reasoning was her assumption that client relationships and financial consulting could be decomposed into discrete transactions rather than ongoing strategic partnerships. Enterprise clients particularly valued the deep understanding of their business context, strategic objectives, and organizational culture that developed through extended relationships with consistent advisory teams. This institutional knowledge enabled more effective strategic recommendations and more nuanced understanding of implementation challenges that could not be replicated through transaction-based service delivery. Moreover, the centralized service model ignored the reality that financial consulting often involved sensitive strategic information and confidential business challenges that clients preferred to discuss with trusted advisors who understood their complete business context. The transaction-based approach would require clients to repeatedly explain their strategic situation and business constraints to different specialists, creating inefficiency and potential security concerns that would undermine the trust relationships essential for effective consulting. The implementation of the centralized service model proceeded despite my documented concerns and objections from several senior account managers who understood the potential impact on client relationships. Within 6 months, client satisfaction scores began declining measurably, while several major clients expressed concerns about the reduced continuity and personalized attention that had previously distinguished Sterling and Associates from institutional competitors. The second warning sign appeared during Victoria's evaluation of the firm's compliance and risk management procedures, which she characterized as unnecessarily conservative and bureaucratic barriers to business development and operational efficiency. The existing compliance framework had been developed over years of experience with regulatory requirements and industry best practices, incorporating comprehensive procedures for client data protection, conflict of interest management, and fiduciary responsibility that exceeded minimum regulatory standards. Victoria argued that the extensive compliance procedures created unnecessary administrative overhead and slowed business development processes, particularly for smaller client relationships, where the comprehensive due diligence and documentation requirements seemed disproportionate to the potential revenue and risk exposure. She proposed streamlining the compliance procedures to focus primarily on regulatory minimum requirements, while eliminating what she termed discretionary best practices that added cost without clear business benefit. This perspective demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of how compliance and risk management actually function in professional service environments. Compliance procedures are not simply regulatory requirements to be minimized, but systematic approaches to protecting client interests and preserving firm reputation that enable sustainable business development and competitive positioning. The comprehensive procedures Victoria wanted to eliminate had prevented numerous potential problems and enabled the firm to serve high-value clients who required superior fiduciary standards. More importantly, the compliance framework served as a competitive differentiator that enabled Sterling & Associates to compete for clients in highly regulated industries and sensitive strategic situations where minimal compliance standards would be insufficient. The firm's reputation for exceeding industry standards had been instrumental in securing several major client relationships that generated substantial ongoing revenue and provided access to additional business development opportunities. The proposed compliance simplification also ignored the reputational and business development risks associated with any compliance failures or regulatory investigations that could result from reduced procedural rigor. Financial service firms that experience compliance problems typically face not only regulatory penalties, but also client defections and difficulty securing new business relationships that can persist for years beyond the initial incident resolution. During my attempts to explain these concerns to Victoria, her response revealed a troubling pattern of decision-making that prioritized immediate cost reduction over long-term value preservation. She seemed to view risk management as an expense to be minimized rather than an investment in sustainable business operations, and she demonstrated little interest in understanding the strategic value of competitive differentiation through superior operational standards. The third warning sign became apparent during Victoria's review of the firm's technology infrastructure and information systems, which she identified as outdated and inefficient compared to modern cloud-based solutions that promised significant cost savings and improved functionality. The existing technology platform had been carefully selected and customized to support the firm's specific operational requirements and compliance standards, with particular attention to data security and system reliability that were essential for serving enterprise clients. Victoria proposed migrating to a standardized cloud-based platform that would reduce ongoing technology costs while providing access to advanced features and automatic updates that would eliminate the need for internal technology management and support. The proposed platform offered impressive capabilities and significant cost advantages compared to maintaining customized internal systems. However, my analysis revealed several critical concerns about the proposed migration that Victoria seemed unwilling to consider seriously. The standardized platform would require modifications to existing operational procedures and client service processes that had been optimized for the current system architecture. The migration process would involve substantial temporary disruption to ongoing operations and potential risks to data integrity that could affect client service delivery during the transition period. More significantly, the cloud-based platform would reduce the firm's control over data security and system configuration in ways that could create compliance challenges and competitive vulnerabilities. Several of the firm's enterprise clients required specific data handling and security standards that exceeded the capabilities of standardized platforms, and the migration could potentially require renegotiation of existing service agreements or loss of clients who could not accept reduced security controls. The proposed technology migration also ignored the strategic value of the customized capabilities that had been developed within the existing platform to support the firm's distinctive service delivery model and competitive positioning. These customizations enabled operational efficiencies and service capabilities that were not available through standardized platforms, and their loss would potentially require process changes that could affect client satisfaction and operational performance. Victoria's response to these concerns followed the same pattern of dismissing operational expertise in favor of superficial cost-benefit analysis that ignored strategic implications and implementation complexity. She characterized my technology assessment as resistance to modernization and unwillingness to embrace innovative solutions that could improve competitive positioning. The fourth warning sign emerged during budget planning discussions, when Victoria proposed significant reductions in professional development and training investments that had been essential for maintaining the firm's expertise and competitive capabilities. The existing professional development program included continuing education requirements, industry conference participation, professional certification maintenance, and specialized training programs that ensured staff capabilities remained current with evolving industry standards and best practices. Victoria argued that professional development expenses represented discretionary spending that could be reduced without affecting core business operations, particularly given the firm's established reputation and experienced staff. She suggested that existing expertise was sufficient for current client requirements, and that external training programs provided minimal incremental value compared to practical experience and internal knowledge sharing. This perspective demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of how professional expertise is maintained and developed in dynamic industries where regulatory requirements, market conditions, and best practices evolve continuously. The financial services industry requires ongoing education and capability development to maintain competence and credibility, and firms that reduce professional development investments typically experience gradual decline in service quality and competitive positioning. The proposed reduction in professional development would particularly affect the firm's ability to serve enterprise clients who expected advisors to demonstrate current knowledge of industry trends, regulatory developments, and emerging best practices. These clients often evaluate advisor qualifications based on continuing education records and professional certifications that require ongoing investment to maintain. Moreover, the professional development program served important functions beyond individual capability enhancement, including staff retention, motivation, and career development, that were essential for maintaining organizational culture and performance. The program had been instrumental in attracting high-quality professionals who valued continuous learning and professional growth, and its reduction would likely affect the firm's ability to recruit and retain top talent. The fifth warning sign appeared during Victoria's evaluation of the firm's quality control and service delivery procedures, which she characterized as unnecessarily detailed and time-consuming processes that reduced efficiency without proportional benefits to client outcomes. The existing quality control framework included comprehensive review procedures, multiple approval stages, and detailed documentation requirements that ensured consistent service quality and error prevention across all client engagements. Victoria proposed streamlining the quality control procedures to focus on major deliverables and high-risk situations, while eliminating routine review processes that she believed created administrative overhead without meaningful value addition. The streamlined approach would enable faster project completion and reduced operational costs, while maintaining adequate oversight for significant client engagements. However, the quality control procedures Victoria wanted to eliminate served essential functions that extended beyond error prevention to include knowledge sharing, capability development, and service standardization that were fundamental to the firm's operational excellence and competitive positioning. The comprehensive review processes enabled senior professionals to mentor junior staff while ensuring that all client deliverables met the firm's standards for quality and professionalism. The quality control framework also served as a critical mechanism for maintaining consistency across different account teams and service areas, ensuring that clients received equivalent levels of attention and expertise, regardless of which specific professionals handled their engagements. This consistency was particularly important for enterprise clients who expected predictable service quality across all interactions with the firm. Additionally, the detailed documentation requirements that Victoria viewed as administrative burden actually provided essential institutional knowledge and precedent records that enabled more effective service delivery for similar client situations in the future. The documentation served as a knowledge management system that preserved lessons learned and best practices that could be applied to improve service delivery efficiency and effectiveness over time. Throughout each of these warning signs, I had attempted to communicate the strategic importance of the capabilities and procedures that Victoria was targeting for elimination or reduction. I prepared detailed analyses demonstrating the business value of existing approaches, presented case studies showing how comprehensive procedures had prevented problems and enabled competitive advantages, and proposed alternative cost reduction strategies that could achieve financial objectives without compromising essential capabilities. Victoria's response to these efforts was consistently dismissive and increasingly hostile. She characterized my concerns as resistance to change and self-interested attempts to preserve unnecessary complexity and administrative overhead. She seemed to interpret operational excellence as inefficiency rather than competitive advantage, and strategic thinking as obstruction rather than value creation. The pattern of Victoria's decision-making revealed a fundamental philosophical difference about the relationship between operational excellence and business success. While I viewed comprehensive procedures and systematic approaches as investments in sustainable competitive advantage, Victoria saw them primarily as costs to be minimized for immediate financial benefit. This philosophical disconnect made meaningful communication increasingly difficult, as Victoria appeared uninterested in understanding the strategic rationale for operational complexity and seemed to believe that business success could be achieved through simplification and cost reduction alone. Her confidence in her own judgment increased despite accumulating evidence that her approach was undermining the foundations of the firm's competitive positioning and long-term viability. Understanding the magnitude of what Victoria Sterling dismissed so carelessly requires examining the specific strategic innovations and operational achievements that had transformed Sterling and Associates from a traditional mid-market consulting firm into a premier financial advisory practice capable of competing with much larger institutional players. The expertise I had developed and applied over 8 years represented far more than administrative coordination or process management. It constituted comprehensive business transformation that had enabled sustainable competitive advantages and measurable value creation. The foundation of my strategic contributions began with a thorough analysis of the firm's market position and competitive landscape when I first joined as Chief Operating Officer. Sterling and Associates occupied a challenging position between smaller boutique firms that served individual clients and large institutional practices that dominated enterprise markets. The firm possessed strong technical capabilities and established client relationships, but lacked the systematic approaches to service delivery and business development that would be necessary for sustainable growth in an increasingly competitive environment. My initial assessment revealed that the firm's greatest asset was Harrison Sterling's personal reputation and the trust relationships he had built over decades of professional service. However, this strength also represented a significant vulnerability, as the firm's success was heavily dependent on Harrison's direct involvement and personal oversight. Any succession planning or growth strategy would need to preserve the personalized service and attention to detail that distinguished the firm, while creating scalable systems that could function effectively beyond Harrison's direct management. The first major innovation I implemented was a comprehensive client relationship management system that captured and systematized the institutional knowledge that had previously existed primarily in Harrison's personal experience and professional network. This system documented not only basic client information and service history, but also strategic context, decision-making patterns, organizational culture, and relationship dynamics that enabled more effective advisory services and business development approaches. The client relationship management system was far more sophisticated than standard customer databases used by most professional service firms. It incorporated detailed profiles of client organizational structure and strategic objectives, analysis of industry trends, and competitive positioning that affected client requirements, documentation of past advisory engagements and outcomes that provided context for future recommendations, and systematic tracking of relationship development opportunities that could enhance service delivery and business development effectiveness. The implementation of this system required extensive collaboration with Harrison and other senior professionals to capture decades of accumulated knowledge and translate it into systematic frameworks that could be utilized by account teams throughout the organization. The process revealed numerous insights about client service patterns and business development opportunities that had been implicit in individual experience but were not systematically leveraged across the firm's operations. The business impact of the client relationship management system was immediate and substantial. Account teams could prepare for client interactions with comprehensive understanding of strategic context and relationship history that enabled more effective advisory services and demonstrated the firm's commitment to understanding client requirements. Business development efforts became more targeted and successful as the system enabled identification of expansion opportunities and strategic timing for new service proposals. The second major innovation involved redesigning the firm's service delivery methodology to incorporate systematic quality control and knowledge management processes that preserved the personalized attention clients valued while ensuring consistent excellence across all engagements. The existing service delivery approach relied heavily on individual expertise and professional judgment, which produced excellent results but created variability in service quality and made it difficult to scale operations efficiently. The new service delivery methodology included standardized frameworks for engagement planning and project management that ensured comprehensive analysis of client requirements and systematic development of strategic recommendations. These frameworks incorporated best practices from strategic consulting methodologies while maintaining the flexibility and personalization that distinguished Sterling & Associates from larger institutional competitors. The methodology also included comprehensive quality review processes that involved multiple senior professionals in evaluating deliverables and strategic recommendations before presentation to clients. These review processes served dual purposes of ensuring accuracy and completeness, while providing mentorship and knowledge transfer opportunities that enhanced overall capabilities throughout the organization. Additionally, the service delivery methodology incorporated systematic documentation and knowledge management procedures that captured lessons learned and best practices from each client engagement. This institutional knowledge base enabled more effective service delivery for similar client situations, while providing training and development resources that enhanced professional capabilities across the organization. The third innovation focused on developing specialized service capabilities that enabled Sterling & Associates to compete effectively for enterprise client relationships that required sophisticated analytical capabilities and comprehensive regulatory expertise. These service areas represented significant growth opportunities, but required investments in specialized knowledge and systematic delivery approaches that exceeded the capabilities most mid-market firms could develop independently. One particularly successful specialization involved developing comprehensive merger and acquisition advisory capabilities that could support complex transactions requiring sophisticated financial analysis, regulatory compliance, and stakeholder management. This capability required extensive expertise in transaction structuring, valuation methodologies, due diligence procedures, and regulatory requirements that were essential for serving enterprise clients involved in strategic transactions. The development of merger and acquisition capabilities involved systematic training and certification programs for key professionals, implementation of specialized analytical tools and databases that supported sophisticated financial modeling, establishment of relationships with legal and regulatory specialists who could provide expert support for complex transactions, and creation of comprehensive quality control procedures that ensured accuracy and completeness of all advisory services. The merger and acquisition practice became one of the firm's most profitable service areas within 2 years of implementation, generating revenue that exceeded development costs by more than 400%, while establishing Sterling & Associates as a recognized expert in mid-market transaction advisory services. The practice also served as a significant business development tool, as successful transaction support often led to ongoing advisory relationships and referrals to other potential clients. Another specialized capability involved developing comprehensive regulatory compliance and risk management advisory services that enabled clients to navigate complex regulatory environments while optimizing operational efficiency and strategic positioning. This capability was particularly valuable for clients in highly regulated industries who required ongoing support for compliance management and regulatory change adaptation. The regulatory advisory capability required deep expertise in financial services regulations, environmental compliance requirements, employment law, and industry-specific regulatory frameworks that affected client operations and strategic planning. The development of this capability involved establishing relationships with regulatory specialists and legal experts, implementing systematic monitoring procedures for regulatory developments that could affect client operations, and creating comprehensive advisory frameworks that could address complex compliance challenges efficiently. The fourth innovation involved implementing advanced technology platforms and analytical capabilities that enabled Sterling & Associates to deliver sophisticated financial analysis and strategic planning services that matched or exceeded the capabilities available from much larger institutional competitors. These technology investments were essential for serving enterprise clients who expected advanced analytical capabilities and comprehensive reporting that supported strategic decision-making. The technology platform included advanced financial modeling and analysis software that enabled sophisticated scenario planning and risk assessment for complex strategic decisions. The platform also incorporated comprehensive database access and research capabilities that provided current market data and competitive intelligence necessary for strategic planning and investment analysis. More importantly, the technology platform included custom analytical tools and reporting systems that were specifically designed to support Sterling and Associates' distinctive service delivery methodology and client relationship approach. These customized capabilities provided competitive advantages that were not available through standard technology solutions and enabled service differentiation that justified premium pricing and enhanced client retention. The technology implementation also included comprehensive training and support programs that ensured all professionals could utilize the advanced capabilities effectively, while maintaining the personalized service approach that distinguished the firm. The training programs included both technical skills development and strategic thinking enhancement that improved overall professional capabilities throughout the organization. The fifth innovation focused on developing systematic business development and market positioning strategies that leveraged the firm's enhanced capabilities and reputation to pursue growth opportunities in targeted market segments. The business development approach was far more sophisticated than traditional relationship-based networking, incorporating systematic market analysis, competitive positioning, and value proposition development that enabled more effective client acquisition and retention. The business development strategy included comprehensive analysis of target market segments and identification of specific growth opportunities that aligned with the firm's capabilities and strategic objectives. This analysis enabled focused business development efforts that were more likely to succeed while requiring fewer resources than broad-based marketing approaches. The strategy also included systematic relationship development and thought leadership initiatives that enhanced the firm's reputation and market visibility within target industry segments. These initiatives included speaking engagements, industry publication contributions, and professional association involvement that demonstrated expertise while building relationships with potential clients and referral sources. Additionally, the business development strategy incorporated comprehensive client satisfaction and retention programs that ensured existing relationships continued to generate revenue growth and referral opportunities. These programs included systematic client feedback collection, service enhancement initiatives, and relationship expansion strategies that maximized the value of existing client relationships while supporting overall growth objectives. The cumulative impact of these innovations was transformational for Sterling and Associates' market position and financial performance. Revenue growth accelerated from historical rates of approximately 8% annually to over 25% annually during the 3 years following implementation. Client retention rates improved from industry average levels of approximately 85% to over 97%. Profit margins increased significantly due to operational efficiency improvements and premium pricing enabled by service differentiation. More importantly, the innovations enabled Sterling and Associates to compete successfully for enterprise client relationships that had previously been dominated by much larger institutional competitors. The firm's enhanced capabilities and systematic service delivery approaches provided competitive advantages that were recognized by sophisticated clients who valued expertise and personalized attention over institutional scale and brand recognition. The success of these strategic innovations had established Sterling and Associates as a recognized leader in mid-market financial advisory services, while creating sustainable competitive advantages that could support continued growth and market expansion. The systematic approaches I had developed were not dependent on individual expertise or personal relationships alone, but created institutional capabilities that could function effectively under different leadership, while preserving the service quality and client focus that had distinguished the firm historically. The recognition of these achievements within the financial services industry had been substantial and measurable. Sterling and Associates received industry awards for service excellence and innovation that enhanced market reputation and business development effectiveness. Professional publications featured case studies of the firm's growth strategy and operational excellence as examples of best practices for mid-market advisory firms. Individual recognition of my contributions included invitations to speak at industry conferences about operational excellence and strategic planning for professional service firms. These speaking opportunities provided additional business development benefits while establishing thought leadership credentials that enhanced both personal and firm reputation within the industry. The most significant validation of the strategic innovations came from client feedback and retention statistics that demonstrated measurable improvements in service quality and client satisfaction following implementation. Client satisfaction surveys consistently rated Sterling and Associates above industry benchmarks across all measured categories, while client retention rates exceeded those of comparable firms by substantial margins. These measurable achievements represented far more than administrative efficiency or process improvement. They constituted comprehensive business transformation that had enabled Sterling and Associates to achieve sustainable competitive advantages and financial performance that positioned the firm for continued success and growth. The expertise required to conceive, develop, and implement these innovations reflected executive-level strategic thinking and operational capability that Victoria Sterling either could not recognize or chose to dismiss for reasons related to her own insecurity about legitimacy as a leader. Victoria Sterling's approach to dismantling the strategic infrastructure I had built over 8 years began with subtle modifications that appeared reasonable on the surface but systematically eroded the foundational capabilities that had enabled Sterling and Associates to achieve its market position and financial success. Her decision-making process revealed a dangerous combination of overconfidence and superficial analysis that failed to recognize the interconnected nature of the systems she was targeting for elimination or modification. The first major dismantling effort focused on what Victoria characterized as excessive administrative overhead in the client relationship management system. She argued that the comprehensive documentation and analysis procedures I had implemented created unnecessary bureaucracy that slowed service delivery and consumed resources that could be better utilized for direct client service. Victoria proposed streamlining the system to focus primarily on basic contact information and billing records, while eliminating what she termed discretionary, analytical, and strategic documentation. Victoria's assessment ignored the strategic value of the comprehensive client intelligence that had enabled Sterling and Associates to deliver superior advisory services and maintain exceptional client retention rates. The detailed documentation of client organizational dynamics, strategic objectives, and decision-making patterns was not administrative overhead but competitive intelligence that enabled more effective service delivery and business development approaches than competitors could match. During the planning meetings for this simplification initiative, I presented detailed analysis demonstrating how the comprehensive client relationship management system had directly contributed to revenue growth and client satisfaction improvements since implementation. The data showed clear correlations between utilization of the system's analytical capabilities and successful client outcomes, while retention statistics demonstrated that clients served through the enhanced approach exhibited substantially higher loyalty and expansion rates. Victoria dismissed this analysis as correlation without causation, arguing that client success was primarily determined by the quality of strategic advice rather than administrative documentation procedures. She maintained that experienced professionals could provide excellent service based on their expertise and judgment, without requiring extensive background research and analytical support systems. This perspective demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of how modern professional services actually function in competitive markets. While individual expertise remained important, systematic approaches to client intelligence and service delivery had become essential for maintaining competitive advantages against larger institutional competitors who possessed superior resources and analytical capabilities. The client relationship management system enabled Sterling and Associates to compete on the basis of superior understanding and personalized service rather than simply scale and brand recognition. The implementation of Victoria's simplified approach proceeded despite documented concerns from senior account managers who understood the value of comprehensive client intelligence for strategic advisory work. Within months, account teams began reporting decreased effectiveness in client interactions and reduced success rates for new service proposals as they lost access to the strategic context and relationship insights that had previously informed their advisory approaches. The second dismantling effort targeted the quality control and knowledge management procedures that had ensured consistent service excellence across all client engagements. Victoria characterized these procedures as micromanagement that undermined professional autonomy and created unnecessary delays in service delivery. She proposed replacing systematic quality review processes with peer consultation that would be utilized at the discretion of individual professionals rather than required for all client deliverables. The existing quality control framework had served multiple strategic purposes beyond error prevention, including knowledge transfer between senior and junior professionals, standardization of service delivery approaches, and continuous improvement of advisory methodologies based on lessons learned from successful client engagements. The systematic review processes had been instrumental in maintaining the service consistency and professional development that distinguished Sterling and Associates from competitors. Victoria's proposed peer consultation approach would eliminate the systematic knowledge management that had captured institutional learning and best practices from 8 years of successful client engagements. The knowledge base that had been developed through comprehensive documentation and review processes represented millions of dollars in accumulated intellectual capital that enhanced service delivery efficiency and effectiveness across the organization. Moreover, the elimination of mandatory quality review processes would create variability in service delivery that could affect client satisfaction and retention rates. The systematic reviews had ensured that all client deliverables met established standards for analytical rigor, strategic insight, and professional presentation, regardless of which specific professionals were responsible for engagement execution. The implementation of discretionary peer consultation created immediate problems with service consistency and quality control. Several client deliverables required revision and resubmission after presentation due to analytical errors and presentation deficiencies that would have been identified and corrected through the previous systematic review processes. The rework required additional resources and created delays that affected client satisfaction and professional credibility. The third dismantling effort focused on the specialized service capabilities that had enabled Sterling and Associates to compete for enterprise client relationships requiring sophisticated analytical and regulatory expertise. Victoria argued that maintaining specialized capabilities required excessive investment in training, technology, and expert personnel that was not justified by the revenue generated from these service areas. Victoria proposed refocusing the firm on traditional advisory services for mid-market clients while eliminating the merger and acquisition practice and regulatory compliance advisory capabilities that had generated substantial revenue and enhanced market positioning. She maintained that the specialized practices diverted resources from core business activities while creating unnecessary complexity in service delivery and business development efforts. This analysis ignored the strategic value of specialized capabilities for overall business development and competitive positioning. The specialized practices had not only generated substantial direct revenue, but had also served as differentiators that enhanced the firm's reputation and credibility across all service areas. The merger and acquisition expertise had enabled larger advisory engagements and longer-term client relationships that would not have been possible through traditional service offerings alone. The regulatory compliance advisory capability had been particularly valuable for business development because it demonstrated the firm's commitment to comprehensive client service and sophisticated analytical capabilities that exceeded those available from most mid-market competitors. The elimination of this capability would reduce the firm's ability to serve clients in regulated industries and limit opportunities for expansion into high-value market segments. The dissolution of specialized practices also eliminated the premium pricing that had been justified by superior capabilities and market positioning. Clients who had been willing to pay higher fees for specialized expertise would likely seek alternative providers who could deliver the comprehensive service capabilities they required, while the firm's repositioning as a traditional mid-market practice would force competition primarily on price rather than value differentiation. The fourth dismantling effort targeted the advanced technology platform and analytical capabilities that had enabled Sterling and Associates to deliver sophisticated financial analysis and strategic planning services that matched the quality available from much larger institutional competitors. Victoria characterized the technology investments as excessive for a mid-market practice and proposed migrating to standard software solutions that would reduce costs while providing adequate functionality for traditional advisory services. The existing technology platform included custom analytical tools and reporting systems that had been specifically designed to support Sterling and Associates' distinctive service delivery methodology and competitive positioning. These customized capabilities provided analytical sophistication and presentation quality that were not available through standard software solutions and enabled service differentiation that justified premium pricing strategies. Victoria's proposed migration to standard technology would eliminate the analytical advantages that had been instrumental in securing enterprise client relationships and maintaining competitive positioning against larger institutional competitors. The standard software solutions could support basic financial analysis and reporting, but lacked the sophisticated modeling capabilities and custom presentation features that had distinguished Sterling and Associates' deliverables and advisory services. The technology migration would also require modifications to existing service delivery procedures and client presentation formats that had been optimized for the current platform's capabilities. These changes would create temporary disruption during the transition period, while potentially reducing the quality and sophistication of client deliverables permanently. The most concerning aspect of the technology downgrade was its impact on professional development and capability enhancement. The advanced analytical tools had served important training functions that enhanced professional skills and analytical thinking across the organization. The elimination of these capabilities would reduce opportunities for professional growth, while potentially affecting the firm's ability to recruit and retain high-quality professionals who valued access to sophisticated analytical tools. The fifth dismantling effort focused on the systematic business development and thought leadership initiatives that had enhanced Sterling & Associates' market visibility and reputation within target industry segments. Victoria argued that speaking engagements, publication contributions, and professional association involvement created excessive time commitments for senior professionals without generating measurable business development results. Victoria proposed eliminating most external professional activities in favor of traditional relationship-based business development that would focus resources on direct client service and personal networking, rather than industry thought leadership and market positioning activities. She maintained that established client relationships and referral networks provided sufficient business development opportunities without requiring extensive investment in market visibility and reputation enhancement activities. This approach ignored the strategic value of thought leadership for long-term business development and competitive positioning. The industry recognition and professional credibility that had been developed through systematic thought leadership activities had enhanced the firm's reputation and market position in ways that generated business development opportunities over extended periods rather than immediate transaction-based results. The thought leadership initiatives had also provided important professional development benefits for senior staff, while enhancing the firm's recruitment capabilities among high-quality professionals who valued association with recognized industry leaders. The elimination of these activities would reduce market visibility, while potentially affecting the firm's ability to attract and retain exceptional talent. Moreover, the systematic approach to thought leadership had created accumulated reputation benefits that would be difficult to rebuild once eliminated. The industry recognition and professional relationships that had been developed over years of consistent participation and contribution would deteriorate rapidly without continued investment and engagement. The cumulative impact of these dismantling efforts was a systematic erosion of the competitive advantages and operational capabilities that had enabled Sterling & Associates to achieve superior market positioning and financial performance. Each individual change appeared reasonable when evaluated in isolation, but the combined effect was to eliminate the strategic differentiation and operational excellence that had distinguished the firm from competitors. Victoria's decision-making process revealed a fundamental inability to understand the interconnected nature of the system she was modifying, and the strategic value of comprehensive approaches to client service and business development. Her focus on immediate cost reduction ignored the long-term value creation that had been achieved through systematic investment in capabilities and competitive positioning. The most troubling aspect of Victoria's approach was her dismissive attitude toward the documented evidence of success and value creation that I provided during discussions of each dismantling initiative. Rather than engaging with analytical demonstrations of strategic value and business impact, she characterized my concerns as resistance to change and protection of unnecessary complexity. This pattern suggested that Victoria's decision-making was driven more by personal preferences and superficial impressions than systematic analysis of business requirements and competitive dynamics. Her willingness to eliminate proven capabilities based on theoretical assumptions rather than empirical evidence demonstrated exactly the kind of poor judgment and strategic thinking that made her unsuitable for continued executive leadership. The irony was that Victoria's efforts to improve efficiency and reduce costs through systematic dismantling were actually creating conditions for reduced competitiveness and financial performance that would ultimately prove far more expensive than maintaining the capabilities she was eliminating. The strategic advantages that had taken years to develop and implement were being destroyed in months through decisions that prioritized short-term cost reduction over long-term value preservation. The moment that sealed everyone's fate arrived on a Tuesday morning in early September, when Victoria Sterling called an emergency executive meeting to address what she characterized as concerning feedback from the board of directors regarding quarterly performance metrics and strategic direction. The meeting was scheduled for 7:30 in the morning in the executive conference room, with attendance required for all senior management personnel and department heads. As I entered the conference room, the tension was immediately apparent from Victoria's rigid posture and the carefully organized presentation materials spread across the mahogany table. She had clearly spent considerable time preparing for this meeting, which suggested that the board feedback had been more serious and comprehensive than her initial characterization indicated. The other attendees appeared equally concerned, though their expressions reflected confusion about the specific issues that had prompted such urgent scheduling. Victoria began the meeting by announcing that Harrison Sterling had returned from his extended medical leave and had conducted a comprehensive review of the firm's operations during his absence. Her tone carried an edge of defensiveness that immediately suggested the review had not validated her leadership decisions or strategic initiatives. She explained that Harrison had expressed concerns about several operational changes and their potential impact on client relationships and market positioning. The revelation that Harrison had been conducting a detailed operational review was significant because it indicated that board members or other stakeholders had raised concerns serious enough to prompt his early return to active oversight. Harrison's medical leave had been intended to last through the end of the year, and his decision to resume operational involvement suggested that the firm's performance or strategic direction had deviated substantially from expectations. Victoria's presentation of Harrison's concerns revealed the scope of the problems that had developed during her systematic dismantling of operational capabilities and strategic frameworks. Client satisfaction scores had declined measurably across multiple service areas, with particular deterioration in the sophisticated analytical services that had distinguished Sterling and Associates from competitors. Several major clients had expressed concerns about reduced service quality and had initiated discussions with alternative advisory firms. More troubling, the firm's revenue pipeline had weakened significantly as business development efforts struggled to generate new enterprise client relationships. The elimination of specialized service capabilities and thought leadership activities had reduced market visibility and competitive positioning in ways that were affecting new business acquisition. The quarterly revenue projections showed substantial shortfalls compared to historical performance and board expectations. Victoria's response to these revelations demonstrated the same pattern of deflecting responsibility and attributing problems to external factors that had characterized her leadership approach throughout her tenure. She argued that market conditions had become more challenging due to increased competition and economic uncertainty, while client expectations had become unrealistic compared to industry standards. She maintained that the operational changes she had implemented were necessary modernization efforts that would deliver benefits over longer time horizons. During the presentation of quarterly metrics, Victoria acknowledged that several key performance indicators had declined compared to previous periods, but she characterized these declines as temporary adjustments related to strategic transitions rather than evidence of fundamental problems with her leadership decisions. She argued that the firm needed to maintain commitment to the modernization initiatives, despite short-term disruption to established procedures and client relationships. The most concerning aspect of Victoria's presentation was her proposal for addressing the board's concerns through additional cost reduction measures and further operational simplification. Rather than recognizing that her previous changes had created the problems she was now attempting to address, Victoria proposed accelerating the dismantling of remaining operational capabilities and strategic frameworks that had not yet been eliminated or modified. Victoria announced her intention to terminate my position as Chief Operating Officer as part of a comprehensive organizational restructuring that would eliminate what she characterized as redundant administrative overhead and unnecessary operational complexity. She explained that my responsibilities would be distributed among existing department heads and external service providers who could deliver equivalent capabilities at reduced cost. The termination announcement represented the culmination of months of escalating tension and fundamental disagreement about strategic direction and operational requirements. Victoria had clearly decided that my continued presence represented a threat to her authority and a reminder of the operational capabilities she had systematically dismantled. The elimination of my position would remove the primary source of analytical evidence demonstrating the negative consequences of her strategic decisions. Victoria's rationale for the termination revealed her complete misunderstanding of the strategic value and operational complexity that my role encompassed. She characterized my position as administrative coordination that could be handled through simplified procedures and external outsourcing arrangements. She argued that modern management practices emphasize streamlined organizational structures and reduce dependence on specialized internal capabilities. The proposal to distribute my responsibilities among existing personnel ignored the reality that operational excellence required dedicated focus and specialized expertise that could not be effectively maintained as secondary responsibilities for professionals whose primary obligations involved client service and business development. The systematic approaches to quality control, knowledge management, and strategic planning that I had developed required continuous attention and refinement that would be impossible to maintain through part-time involvement. Moreover, Victoria's suggestion that external service providers could deliver equivalent operational support demonstrated her fundamental ignorance of the customized capabilities and institutional knowledge that had been developed specifically for Sterling & Associates' distinctive service delivery methodology and competitive positioning. External providers could offer generic administrative services, but they could not replicate the strategic understanding and operational expertise that had been developed through years of experience with the firm's specific requirements and market dynamics. During the discussion period following Victoria's presentation, I made what would prove to be my final attempt to communicate the strategic importance of maintaining operational capabilities and the potentially catastrophic consequences of her proposed organizational restructuring. I presented comprehensive analysis demonstrating the direct correlation between operational excellence and business performance, including specific examples of how systematic approaches had prevented problems and enabled competitive advantages. The analysis included detailed documentation of client satisfaction improvements that had resulted from enhanced service delivery capabilities, revenue growth that had been generated through systematic business development approaches, and cost savings that had been achieved through operational optimization and strategic positioning. The evidence clearly demonstrated that operational excellence had been instrumental in the firm's success and competitive positioning. Victoria's response to this final presentation of evidence was dismissive and revealed the depth of her commitment to decisions that had already been made without regard for analytical evidence or strategic considerations. She characterized my analysis as self-interested protection of administrative complexity and unwillingness to embrace modern management practices that prioritized efficiency over elaborate procedural frameworks. Her dismissal of documented evidence and measurable business impact demonstrated the fundamental anti-intellectual approach that had characterized her leadership throughout her tenure. Victoria consistently prioritized intuitive decision-making and superficial analysis over systematic evaluation of alternatives and evidence-based strategic planning. Her willingness to ignore comprehensive analytical evidence in favor of theoretical assumptions represented exactly the kind of poor judgment that made her unsuitable for executive leadership. The meeting concluded with Victoria's announcement that my termination would be effective immediately, with 2 weeks of severance compensation and elimination of all access to firm systems and client information. The abrupt nature of the termination was intended to prevent any opportunity for me to document additional evidence of operational problems, or communicate concerns to board members or other stakeholders who might question her strategic direction. The immediate termination also demonstrated Victoria's recognition that my continued presence represented a threat to her narrative about the firm's performance and strategic direction. As long as I remained within the organization, my expertise and analytical capabilities would provide continuing evidence of the problems created by her leadership decisions and the strategic value of the capabilities she had eliminated. As I gathered my personal belongings and prepared to leave Sterling & Associates for the final time, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions that included disappointment about the destruction of years of strategic work, frustration with Victoria's unwillingness to engage with evidence and analysis, and concern about the impact of her decisions on colleagues and clients who would suffer the consequences of her poor judgment. However, underneath these immediate emotional reactions, I also felt a sense of anticipation and strategic clarity about what would inevitably follow from Victoria's decisions. The operational capabilities and competitive advantages that had taken years to develop could not be eliminated without serious consequences for business performance and market positioning. Victoria was about to discover that systematic dismantling of proven capabilities would create problems that could not be resolved through further simplification or cost reduction measures. The irony of Victoria's confidence in her decision-making was that she had eliminated the primary source of analytical expertise and strategic thinking that could have helped address the problems her leadership had created. The termination of my position removed the systematic approaches to problem identification and solution development that had been instrumental in maintaining operational excellence and competitive positioning throughout the firm's recent growth period. The most significant consequence of Victoria's decision was that she had eliminated the institutional knowledge and analytical capabilities that would be necessary for understanding the scope and interconnected nature of the problems that were about to emerge. The systematic documentation and analysis that I had maintained provided the only comprehensive framework for evaluating operational performance and identifying strategic solutions to business challenges. Without access to this analytical framework and institutional knowledge, Victoria would be reduced to reactive problem-solving based on incomplete information and superficial understanding of the complex operational dynamics that affected business performance. The elimination of systematic analytical capabilities would make it extremely difficult to develop effective solutions to the problems that her strategic decisions had created. Moreover, the abrupt nature of my termination would itself become evidence of the poor judgment and interpersonal skills that characterized Victoria's leadership approach. Professional executives do not terminate senior staff members without proper transition planning and knowledge transfer procedures, particularly when those positions involve complex operational responsibilities and institutional knowledge that affects business continuity. The termination decision would provide clear evidence to board members and other stakeholders that Victoria's leadership approach prioritized immediate personal convenience over long-term organizational stability and strategic planning. The disruption created by eliminating operational expertise without adequate replacement capabilities would demonstrate exactly the kind of poor judgment and strategic thinking that made her unsuitable for continued executive authority. As I left the Sterling and Associates offices for the final time, I understood that Victoria's attempt to eliminate the evidence of her poor decision-making had actually created the conditions for her strategic failures to become undeniably apparent to everyone within the organization and the broader business community. The operational problems that had been developing gradually under her leadership would now accelerate rapidly without the systematic approaches to problem identification and resolution that had been maintaining organizational stability. The point of no return had been reached not because I was no longer available to prevent problems, but because Victoria had demonstrated through her termination decision that she was fundamentally incapable of learning from evidence or adapting her approach based on analytical evaluation of results. Her commitment to strategic decisions that ignored comprehensive evidence and expert analysis represented a leadership failure that would inevitably produce consequences commensurate with the magnitude of her poor judgment. The first signs of crisis at Sterling and Associates emerged within 72 hours of my termination, manifesting initially as isolated operational disruptions that Victoria Sterling dismissed as temporary adjustment issues related to organizational restructuring. The absence of systematic oversight and analytical capabilities created immediate gaps in quality control and client service coordination that began generating problems faster than the remaining staff could identify and address them. The initial manifestation appeared in the form of a critical error in a financial analysis deliverable prepared for Meridian Industries, one of the firm's largest enterprise clients. The analysis contained fundamental miscalculations in the valuation methodology that would have resulted in strategic recommendations potentially costing the client millions of dollars in misallocated resources. Under the previous quality control framework, such errors would have been identified and corrected during systematic review processes before client presentation. However, the streamlined peer consultation approach that Victoria had implemented relied on voluntary review requests rather than mandatory oversight procedures. The senior analyst responsible for the Meridian deliverable had assumed that the calculations were straightforward enough to proceed without consultation, while the account manager had focused on presentation and client relationship aspects rather than detailed analytical verification. The error was discovered only when Meridian's internal financial team identified inconsistencies during their own review of the recommendations and requested clarification of the analytical methodology. The client's discovery of the error represented precisely the kind of quality control failure that systematic review processes had been designed to prevent, and it created immediate concerns about the reliability of Sterling and Associates' analytical capabilities. Victoria's response to the Meridian incident demonstrated her continued inability to recognize the connection between operational changes and business consequences. She characterized the error as an isolated mistake that reflected individual performance issues rather than systematic problems with quality control procedures. She proposed addressing the situation through additional training for the responsible analyst rather than reconsidering the elimination of comprehensive review processes. The second early indicator emerged from the client relationship management system, where the absence of systematic documentation and analysis procedures had created information gaps that affected service delivery effectiveness across multiple client relationships. Account teams began reporting difficulties in preparing for client interactions because the simplified system no longer provided the strategic context and relationship insights that had previously informed their advisory approaches. The deterioration in client interaction effectiveness became apparent during a strategic planning session with Continental Manufacturing, where the account team lacked sufficient background information about recent organizational changes and strategic initiatives that had been documented in the previous system but were no longer captured under the streamlined approach. The resulting advisory recommendations failed to address critical contextual factors that affected implementation feasibility and strategic alignment. Continental's management expressed disappointment with the quality of strategic analysis and questioned whether Sterling and Associates still possessed the deep understanding of their business requirements that had previously distinguished the firm's advisory services. The client indicated that they would need to evaluate alternative advisory relationships if service quality did not improve substantially in subsequent engagements. Victoria's interpretation of the Continental feedback focused on individual performance issues and communication problems rather than systematic gaps in client intelligence and analytical preparation. She proposed addressing the situation through improved account team coordination and better client communication procedures, without acknowledging that the streamlined relationship management system had eliminated the information infrastructure necessary for effective preparation and strategic analysis. The third early warning sign appeared in the business development area, where the elimination of thought leadership activities and systematic market positioning efforts had reduced the firm's visibility and credibility within target industry segments. Prospective clients who had previously initiated contact with Sterling and Associates based on industry recognition and professional reputation were now approaching alternative advisory firms that maintained stronger market presence and thought leadership positioning. The decline in inbound business development inquiries became apparent during the monthly pipeline review, where new prospect identification had decreased by approximately 40% compared to historical averages. The remaining prospects were predominantly smaller engagements with limited growth potential, rather than the enterprise relationships that had driven recent revenue expansion and market positioning advancement. Victoria attributed the business development challenges to broader market conditions and increased competition rather than recognizing the impact of eliminating systematic market positioning and thought leadership activities. She proposed addressing the pipeline concerns through increased networking efforts and traditional relationship-based business development approaches, without understanding that market visibility and professional credibility required sustained investment and systematic positioning that could not be replaced through individual networking alone. The fourth immediate consequence emerged from the technology platform downgrade, where the migration to standard software solutions had eliminated analytical capabilities that were essential for sophisticated financial modeling and strategic analysis. The reduced functionality became problematic during preparation of a comprehensive merger analysis for Apex Corporation, where the standard software could not support the complex scenario modeling and sensitivity analysis that the client required for strategic decision-making. The analytical limitations forced the account team to utilize external consulting resources to complete the required modeling, which increased project costs while introducing coordination challenges and potential quality control issues. The need for external support also extended project timelines and created client concerns about Sterling and Associates' internal capabilities and self-sufficiency for complex analytical work. The Apex situation highlighted the strategic importance of advanced analytical capabilities for maintaining competitive positioning in enterprise markets. Clients who required sophisticated financial analysis expected their advisory firms to possess internal capabilities that could support comprehensive strategic evaluation without dependence on external resources or coordination challenges that could affect project quality and timeline reliability. Victoria's response to the Apex challenges focused on cost control and project management efficiency, rather than recognizing that the technology downgrade had eliminated competitive capabilities that were essential for serving enterprise clients effectively. She proposed developing relationships with external analytical service providers, rather than acknowledging that internal capabilities were necessary for maintaining service quality and competitive differentiation. The fifth early indicator appeared in staff morale and retention, where the elimination of professional development opportunities and advanced analytical tools had reduced job satisfaction and career development prospects for high-performing professionals. Several senior analysts and account managers began expressing concerns about the firm's strategic direction and their own professional growth opportunities within the revised organizational structure. The staff concerns were particularly pronounced among professionals who had been attracted to Sterling and Associates based on the firm's reputation for analytical excellence and sophisticated service capabilities. These individuals had viewed their association with the firm as enhancing their professional credentials and providing access to challenging assignments that would support career advancement and skill development. The systematic elimination of advanced capabilities and professional development opportunities had transformed Sterling and Associates from a prestigious advisory firm into a more traditional mid-market practice that offered limited opportunities for professional growth and intellectual challenge. The resulting impact on staff motivation and retention threatened to create additional operational disruptions as experienced professionals considered alternative employment opportunities. Victoria's assessment of staff concerns focused on compensation and work-life balance issues, rather than recognizing that professional fulfillment and career development opportunities were equally important for attracting and retaining high-quality talent. She proposed addressing morale issues through team-building activities and flexible work arrangements, without understanding that professional growth and intellectual challenge were fundamental motivational factors for ambitious advisory professionals. The cumulative impact of these immediate consequences created a cascade of operational problems that began reinforcing each other in ways that accelerated the deterioration of service quality and competitive positioning. Quality control failures affected client confidence, which reduced business development effectiveness and created pressure for cost reduction that further compromised service capabilities and staff retention. The interconnected nature of these problems demonstrated the strategic importance of the systematic approaches that Victoria had eliminated. The operational frameworks that I had developed were not simply administrative procedures, but integrated systems that supported multiple aspects of business performance simultaneously. The elimination of these frameworks had removed the coordination mechanisms that prevented isolated problems from escalating into systematic failures. Moreover, the absence of comprehensive analytical capabilities meant that Victoria and her remaining management team lacked the tools necessary for understanding the scope and interconnected nature of the emerging problems. The systematic documentation and analysis procedures that had been eliminated were precisely the capabilities that would be needed for effective problem identification and solution development. The most concerning aspect of the immediate aftermath was Victoria's consistent pattern of attributing problems to external factors and individual performance issues, rather than recognizing that her strategic decisions had created systematic vulnerabilities that required comprehensive solutions. Her inability to acknowledge the connection between operational changes and business consequences suggested that she would continue making decisions that would accelerate rather than address the developing crisis. The staff members who remained at Sterling and Associates found themselves attempting to maintain service quality and client relationships without the systematic support and analytical tools that had previously enabled effective performance. Their individual efforts to compensate for eliminated capabilities created additional stress and inefficiency that further reduced overall organizational effectiveness. The clients who had developed relationships with Sterling and Associates based on expectations of analytical excellence and systematic service delivery began questioning whether the firm could continue meeting their requirements for sophisticated strategic advice and comprehensive project support. The declining service quality created immediate concerns about relationship continuity and long-term strategic planning reliability. The competitive implications of these immediate consequences were particularly troubling because they affected Sterling and Associates' positioning within enterprise markets that had been instrumental in recent growth and profitability improvements. The loss of competitive capabilities and service differentiation would force the firm to compete primarily on price rather than value, which would reduce profit margins while increasing vulnerability to larger institutional competitors. The irony of Victoria's situation was that her attempts to improve efficiency and reduce costs through systematic elimination of operational capabilities had created conditions that would ultimately prove far more expensive than maintaining the frameworks she had dismantled. The cost of addressing quality control failures, client relationship problems, staff turnover, and competitive positioning challenges would exceed the savings generated through operational simplification. The immediate aftermath demonstrated that operational excellence and competitive capabilities could not be eliminated without serious consequences for business performance and market positioning. The systematic approaches that Victoria had characterized as unnecessary complexity were actually essential foundations that enabled sustainable competitive advantages and profitable growth in sophisticated markets. The 3-day period following my termination had revealed the fragility of organizational capabilities that appeared stable when supported by systematic frameworks, but deteriorated rapidly when those supporting structures were removed. The problems that emerged were not temporary adjustment issues, but early indicators of systematic failures that would accelerate without effective intervention and strategic correction. The systematic breakdown of Sterling and Associates accelerated exponentially during the second week following my termination, as the initial operational disruptions triggered interconnected failures throughout the organization that Victoria Sterling proved incapable of understanding or addressing effectively. The absence of comprehensive analytical frameworks and institutional knowledge created a cascade of problems that reinforced each other in ways that transformed isolated incidents into organizational crisis. The first major escalation occurred when Meridian Industries, already concerned about the analytical errors in their financial assessment, discovered additional inconsistencies in historical reports that had been prepared using the streamlined quality control procedures. Their internal audit team identified calculation discrepancies in 3 separate deliverables spanning the previous 6 months, suggesting that quality control problems were systematic rather than isolated incidents. Meridian's management demanded a comprehensive review of all analytical work performed by Sterling and Associates during the period when quality control procedures had been modified. The review requirement created immediate resource allocation challenges because the firm lacked the systematic documentation and analytical frameworks necessary for efficient verification of previous work. The absence of comprehensive quality control records meant that the review process would require recreating analytical methodologies and verification procedures from incomplete documentation. The resource demands of the Meridian review forced Sterling and Associates to delay or reduce service levels for other clients, creating secondary problems with project timelines and service delivery commitments. The cascading impact on other client relationships demonstrated how quality control failures could multiply exponentially when systematic frameworks for managing multiple concurrent engagements had been eliminated. Victoria's response to the Meridian crisis revealed her continued inability to comprehend the scope and interconnected nature of the problems her decisions had created. She characterized the situation as an unfortunate client misunderstanding that could be resolved through improved communication and additional analytical verification. Her proposed solution involved assigning additional staff to the Meridian review without acknowledging that the fundamental problem was the absence of systematic quality control procedures that could prevent such issues from occurring. The second major escalation emerged from the technology platform limitations, which proved inadequate for supporting the analytical requirements of multiple concurrent client engagements. The standard software solutions that had replaced the customized analytical platform could not efficiently handle the complex financial modeling required for strategic advisory work, forcing account teams to utilize inefficient workarounds that consumed excessive time while producing inferior analytical results. The technology limitations became particularly problematic during preparation of a comprehensive strategic assessment for Phoenix Financial Group, where the analytical requirements exceeded the capabilities of the standard software platform. The account team required external consulting support to complete the financial modeling, which not only increased project costs, but also introduced coordination challenges and potential confidentiality concerns that affected client confidence in Sterling & Associates' internal capabilities. The Phoenix engagement highlighted the strategic importance of advanced analytical capabilities for maintaining competitive positioning in enterprise markets. The inability to deliver sophisticated financial analysis using internal resources created immediate questions about the firm's competitiveness compared to larger institutional advisory firms that possessed comprehensive analytical capabilities and advanced technology platforms. The technology deficiencies also affected the efficiency of routine analytical work across all client engagements, as account teams struggled with software limitations that required manual calculations and time-consuming verification procedures. The reduced efficiency created pressure on project timelines and profit margins, while increasing the risk of analytical errors due to manual processing requirements. Victoria's assessment of the technology challenges focused on staff training and process adaptation, rather than recognizing that the software downgrade had eliminated essential capabilities that were necessary for maintaining competitive service delivery. Her proposed solution involved developing standardized analytical templates that could function within the limitations of the current software, without understanding that template-based approaches could not replicate the sophisticated customization that distinguished Sterling & Associates from generic advisory services. The third escalation occurred in the business development area, where the cumulative impact of reduced service quality and eliminated thought leadership activities had created measurable deterioration in market positioning and competitive credibility. Prospective clients who conducted competitive evaluations increasingly selected alternative advisory firms that demonstrated superior analytical capabilities and market recognition. The business development challenges became particularly apparent during a competitive presentation for Titan Manufacturing, where Sterling & Associates' proposal was eliminated during the preliminary evaluation phase due to concerns about analytical capabilities and recent client service issues. The prospective client's feedback indicated that Sterling & Associates was no longer considered competitive with leading advisory firms in terms of service quality and technological sophistication. The Titan rejection represented more than lost revenue opportunity. It signaled broader market perception changes that could affect the firm's ability to compete for enterprise clients across all industry segments. The cumulative impact of quality control failures, technology limitations, and reduced market visibility had created reputational concerns that would be difficult to address without comprehensive operational improvements and strategic repositioning. The business development deterioration also affected the firm's pipeline of potential future engagements, as industry networks and referral relationships began directing opportunities toward alternative advisory firms with stronger reputations for service excellence and analytical capabilities. The reduction in business development opportunities created additional pressure on existing client relationships to generate revenue growth through expanded service delivery. Victoria's response to the business development challenges revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of how professional service markets actually function. She attributed competitive losses to pricing pressures and market conditions, rather than recognizing that service quality and capabilities were primary factors in client selection decisions. Her proposed solution involved aggressive pricing strategies that would reduce profit margins without addressing the underlying competitiveness issues. The fourth escalation manifested in staff retention problems, as experienced professionals began departing Sterling & Associates for positions with competing firms that offered superior professional development opportunities and more sophisticated analytical capabilities. The staff departures created immediate knowledge gaps and increased workload pressures for remaining personnel, while also sending negative signals to clients about organizational stability and service continuity. The most significant departure involved Margaret Foster, the senior manager responsible for the regulatory compliance advisory practice, who accepted a position with Hamilton & Associates after expressing frustration with the elimination of specialized service capabilities and professional development opportunities. Margaret's departure effectively ended Sterling & Associates' ability to serve clients requiring sophisticated regulatory expertise, forcing the firm to refer such opportunities to competitors. The loss of regulatory compliance capabilities represented a substantial reduction in service breadth and competitive positioning that would affect the firm's ability to serve enterprise clients with comprehensive advisory requirements. The departure also eliminated specialized expertise that had taken years to develop, and would be extremely difficult to replace given the firm's reduced market reputation and limited professional development opportunities. Additional staff departures in the analytical and account management areas created operational disruptions that affected service delivery for multiple client relationships simultaneously. The remaining staff members found themselves overwhelmed with increased responsibilities, while lacking the systematic support frameworks that had previously enabled efficient performance and quality control. Victoria's assessment of the retention problems focused on compensation and benefits issues, rather than recognizing that professional growth opportunities and intellectually challenging work were equally important motivational factors for high-performing advisory professionals. Her proposed solutions involved salary adjustments and improved work-life balance policies, without acknowledging that the elimination of advanced capabilities and sophisticated client work had reduced the fundamental attractiveness of positions at Sterling and Associates. The fifth escalation occurred when Harrison Sterling returned from medical leave and conducted a comprehensive assessment of the firm's operational status and financial performance. His evaluation revealed the full scope of the deterioration that had occurred during Victoria's leadership, including declining client satisfaction, reduced competitive positioning, and systematic elimination of capabilities that had been essential for the firm's market success. Harrison's assessment documented measurable declines across all key performance indicators, including client retention rates that had decreased from 97% to 82%, revenue pipeline reductions of approximately 40%, and profit margin compression due to increased operational inefficiencies and competitive pricing pressures. The comprehensive analysis revealed that Victoria's cost reduction initiatives had actually increased total operational costs while reducing service quality and competitive capabilities. The most damaging aspect of Harrison's assessment was his discovery that the systematic elimination of operational frameworks and analytical capabilities had created long-term competitive vulnerabilities that would require substantial time and investment to address. The institutional knowledge and specialized capabilities that had been developed over years of strategic investment could not be easily restored without comprehensive organizational rebuilding and market repositioning efforts. Harrison's evaluation also revealed that several major clients were actively considering alternative advisory relationships due to concerns about service quality and analytical capabilities. The potential loss of key client relationships would create immediate revenue reductions, while also affecting the firm's market reputation and business development effectiveness for extended periods. The cumulative impact of these cascading failures created an organizational crisis that threatened the fundamental viability of Sterling and Associates as a competitive advisory firm. The interconnected nature of the problems meant that addressing individual issues would be insufficient without comprehensive operational rebuilding and strategic repositioning that would require resources and expertise that the firm no longer possessed internally. Victoria's response to Harrison's assessment demonstrated her continued inability to acknowledge responsibility for the strategic failures or understand the scope of the problems her decisions had created. She attributed the difficulties to temporary market conditions and implementation challenges, rather than recognizing that systematic elimination of proven capabilities had created fundamental competitive disadvantages that would persist without comprehensive correction. The most troubling aspect of Victoria's reaction was her proposal to address the crisis through additional cost reduction measures and further operational simplification. Her inability to recognize that cost reduction had created, rather than solve the fundamental problems, suggested that she would continue making decisions that would accelerate rather than reverse the organizational deterioration. The cascading failures had revealed the strategic importance of the systematic frameworks and analytical capabilities that Victoria had dismissed as unnecessary complexity. The operational excellence that had enabled Sterling and Associates to compete successfully with larger institutional firms could not be maintained through simplified procedures and reduced capabilities, regardless of theoretical efficiency gains or cost reduction benefits. The crisis also demonstrated that organizational capabilities were interconnected systems that could not be eliminated selectively without affecting overall performance and competitive positioning. The quality control procedures, analytical frameworks, technology platforms, and professional development programs that Victoria had targeted for elimination were actually integral components of a comprehensive operational system that enabled sustainable competitive advantages. The immediate consequence of the cascading failures was that Sterling and Associates had transformed from a prestigious advisory firm with distinctive capabilities into a struggling mid-market practice, with limited competitive advantages and questionable long-term viability. The systematic elimination of operational excellence had created exactly the kind of organizational crisis that comprehensive frameworks were designed to prevent. The recognition of my expertise came through an unexpected phone call on Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after my termination from Sterling & Associates. The caller was Dr. Michael Harrison, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Pinnacle Strategic Advisors, one of Chicago's most prestigious financial consulting firms, and a direct competitor to Sterling & Associates in the enterprise advisory market. Dr. Harrison explained that he had learned about my departure through professional networks and was interested in discussing potential opportunities for collaboration. Pinnacle Strategic Advisors represented everything that Sterling & Associates had been striving to become before Victoria Sterling's misguided leadership decisions derailed the firm's strategic direction. Founded 15 years earlier by Dr. Harrison, who held a doctorate in economics from the University of Chicago and had previously served as a senior partner at Goldman Sachs, Pinnacle had established itself as the premier advisory firm for Fortune 500 companies requiring sophisticated financial analysis and strategic planning services. The firm's reputation was built on a foundation of analytical excellence, operational precision, and comprehensive service capabilities that enabled successful competition with the largest institutional advisory firms, while maintaining the personalized attention and strategic focus that distinguished boutique practices. Pinnacle's client portfolio included multinational corporations, private equity firms, and government agencies that required the highest levels of analytical sophistication and professional discretion. Dr. Harrison's initial contact was both professionally flattering and strategically intriguing. He explained that Pinnacle had been monitoring Sterling & Associates' market position and competitive capabilities for several years, with particular interest in the operational innovations and service delivery enhancements that had enabled the firm's recent growth and market expansion. He indicated that industry analysts had attributed much of Sterling & Associates' competitive improvement to systematic operational excellence and strategic planning capabilities that exceeded typical mid-market advisory standards. During our initial conversation, Dr. Harrison demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of the strategic value and competitive importance of the operational frameworks and analytical capabilities that I had developed at Sterling & Associates. His questions revealed comprehensive knowledge of modern advisory firm management and appreciation for the systematic approaches that enabled sustainable competitive advantages in sophisticated markets. Dr. Harrison explained that Pinnacle was pursuing an aggressive growth strategy that involved expanding service capabilities and market penetration, while maintaining the analytical excellence and service quality that had established the firm's premium market position. The growth strategy required operational expertise and systematic frameworks that could support increased scale and complexity without compromising the service differentiation and competitive advantages that justified premium pricing and attracted sophisticated clients. The opportunity that Dr. Harrison presented involved joining Pinnacle as Chief Operating Officer with expanded responsibilities for strategic planning and business development that would utilize my comprehensive understanding of advisory firm operations and competitive positioning. The position would include equity participation in the firm's ownership structure and authority to implement systematic operational enhancements that could support continued growth and market expansion. The compensation package that Dr. Harrison outlined exceeded my previous salary at Sterling & Associates by approximately 40%, while the equity participation provided opportunities for substantial additional compensation based on the firm's continued growth and profitability. More importantly, the position offered the professional recognition and strategic authority that had been systematically undermined during Victoria Sterling's tenure as Chief Executive Officer. The cultural alignment between my professional values and Pinnacle's organizational philosophy was immediately apparent during our discussions about strategic planning and operational excellence. Dr. Harrison emphasized that sustainable competitive advantages required systematic investment in capabilities and frameworks that enabled superior service delivery and market positioning, rather than cost reduction approaches that compromised essential functions and strategic differentiation. Pinnacle's commitment to operational excellence was evident in their existing systems and procedures, which incorporated many of the best practices and analytical frameworks that I had developed at Sterling & Associates, while extending those concepts to support larger-scale operations and more sophisticated client requirements. The firm's technology platform included advanced analytical capabilities and comprehensive reporting systems that exceeded the standards typically available at mid-market advisory firms. The professional development opportunities at Pinnacle included access to advanced training programs, industry conferences, and continuing education initiatives that would enhance analytical capabilities and strategic thinking skills. The firm's commitment to professional growth and intellectual development aligned perfectly with my own values regarding continuous learning and capability enhancement that enabled superior performance and competitive positioning. During the interview process, I had opportunities to meet with several senior professionals at Pinnacle who demonstrated exceptional competence and collaborative approaches to client service and business development. The intellectual caliber and professional standards of the team exceeded those typically found at advisory firms of comparable size, reflecting Dr. Harrison's systematic approach to talent acquisition and professional development. The client portfolio and service engagements that Pinnacle handled provided exactly the kind of sophisticated analytical challenges and strategic planning opportunities that I found most professionally rewarding. The firm's clients included multinational corporations requiring complex merger and acquisition analysis, private equity firms needing comprehensive due diligence and investment evaluation services, and government agencies requiring sophisticated economic analysis and policy evaluation support. The most compelling aspect of the Pinnacle opportunity was the potential for implementing comprehensive operational improvements and strategic initiatives without the resistance and political complications that had characterized my experience at Sterling and Associates. Dr. Harrison explicitly encouraged innovative thinking and systematic enhancement of operational capabilities, recognizing that competitive advantages required continuous investment in frameworks and systems that enabled superior performance. The decision to accept the Pinnacle position was straightforward, because it represented validation of the expertise and strategic thinking that Victoria Sterling had dismissed so carelessly. The immediate recognition of value and professional competence provided satisfying confirmation that the operational capabilities and analytical frameworks I had developed were indeed essential for competitive success in sophisticated advisory markets. The contrast between drive, Harrison's appreciation for systematic operational excellence, and Victoria Sterling's dismissive attitude toward analytical frameworks was particularly striking. While Victoria had characterized comprehensive procedures as unnecessary complexity, Dr. Harrison understood that sophisticated clients required systematic approaches to service delivery and quality control that could not be achieved through simplified procedures or reduced capabilities. The acceptance of the Pinnacle position also provided an opportunity to demonstrate the strategic value of operational excellence and analytical sophistication in an environment where such capabilities would be properly supported and systematically enhanced. The potential for achieving exceptional results through comprehensive operational frameworks would provide definitive evidence of the competitive advantages that Victoria Sterling had carelessly eliminated. The timing of the Pinnacle opportunity was particularly fortuitous because it enabled immediate transition to a challenging and rewarding professional environment without the extended job search process that might have been required under different circumstances. The recognition and recruitment by Dr. Harrison demonstrated that expertise and professional competence were valued and sought after in competitive markets, regardless of the treatment received from previous employers. The negotiation process for the Pinnacle position proceeded efficiently because Dr. Harrison understood the strategic value of operational expertise and was prepared to provide compensation and authority commensurate with the contribution potential. The equity participation structure provided long-term alignment between personal success and organizational performance, while ensuring that operational improvements would generate appropriate personal rewards. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.